Welcome to IEP Radio, a show dedicated to the education of all things indoor environmental quality related. And now here's your host, Michael Schrantz.
Welcome to IEP Radio. This is episode 33. I am happy to have back on the podcast President and CEO John Bernert with Air Oasis. We previously had John and his brother on the podcast to discuss the air filtration and purifications and some of the amazing research being performed on their devices. That's episode 17. You need to check that episode out first if you haven't. But that was back in September of 2019. It's been a minute, and I really wanted to have them back on. This company continues to amaze me, and with all the confusing and even bad information out there regarding use of purification technology, with all the scams and snake oil being sold by companies wanting to make a quick buck, I wanted to bring back Air Oasis, who is one of the few, if not only company I know with a level of integrity and transparency that clearly favors the consumer and the industry. In this episode, we're going to discuss some of that misleading information out there. We are going to address head-on some of the concerns being brought up by the simply curious or uninformed regarding byproducts, including the production of ultrafine particulates. And if that doesn't whet your appetite enough, hold on. We're diving deeper into the continued third-party research on Air Oasis devices, specifically the iAdaptAir, and drumroll, their newest addition to their product line, the iAdaptAir 2.0, a unit that is the result of continued R&D, part of which is listening to what consumers want and even what the clinicians are asking for. Let's not stall another second and begin our in-depth exploration with one of the best in the industry, Air Oasis. John, welcome back to the show.
Nice to be here, Michael. Thank you.
You know, it's been a minute since we've spoken. I'm so excited for today because I know we have so many juicy topics to cover. It was September of 2019, episode 17, for those of you who want a reference of when Air Oasis, John and Jeff were both on the podcast to talk about Air Oasis and their line of products, an extensive, exhaustive overview of kind of all of the third-party research they were doing, which really is one of the reasons why I was first so attracted to their company versus everybody else, is that they're really showing all their cards, if you will. It seems like so many companies I know don't either go out of their way to tell you that they're doing these sorts of independent studies to validate, that their equipment, their units, their technology are doing what they say they're doing, or that they flat out just haven't done it. So either way, it's such a good thing I love about Air Oasis. And we brought them back today because, well, there's a few things. Want to get an update on just some more studies that they've done with one of their units that they've had out for quite some time, the iAdaptAir. Really excited to get into some of that details. Also to talk about their new unit that just got released, basically the iAdaptAir 2.0. And so before we do that, some of you that are listening, this may be your first introduction to Air Oasis. So John, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'm wondering if maybe you could just give the audience a little bit of a brief history again of the beginnings of Air Oasis, kind of where it's at today, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mike. Air Oasis, I guess, officially started December 2004. So we don't usually count that year. So let's say 2005. So we're going on 19 years in business within the air purification industry. And yeah, we've seen it all during that time. We've started a company with just a simple one product that was the Air Oasis 3000 G3 way back in the day. It was a filterless product, contained just PCO technology and UV basically. And over the years, we've evolved into many different products. Our goal at Air Oasis, we always say, is not global dominance or perfection or anything like that. Our goal is just continual improvement. So that's what we've done over the years. We've listened to our customers. We've listened to experts such as yourself and taken all that feedback and just evolved our product line year after year after year to develop what we have today.
Right. And one of the biggest things about, again, the growth of this industry is the wealth of information that people have at their hands. When I grew up, not that I'm trying to act like I'm 80 years old, encyclopedias were still in use.
You have a little bit of gray in your beard, so.
Yeah, did you notice that? Darn those AI technologies that aren't working to kind of clean it up. And now, though, we don't just have access to the internet and like Google searches. Now we have AI technology, and there's so much information out there. The reason I bring this up is because as a host of this show and as an IEP doing the work in the field, we're hearing more and more concerns more about, the technology, not so much the filtration. You guys have the iAdaptAir product lines, and they have filtration, carbon, and these are more understood technologies. They're safer. It's simple removal, kind of a passive approach, if you will, to improving indoor air quality. And I rarely hear anything. It's about that, but we always hear about the purification. I want to dive into that a little bit, and what, just for those of you who may not really know where I'm going with this. A lot of times when companies are utilizing purification, like hydroxyl radicals, UV light, ionization, these sorts of things, there are concerns about either the exposure to the technology, or in many cases, what we're hearing a ton about is the potential byproducts that they can create. I always joke with, not really joke, but use as a kind of a fun example, that if back in the day when we had more malls and you would go visit malls, if you had a candle store and you brought, say, for example, an ozone generator to that candle store, one of the byproducts that could be created is formaldehyde. And so that, I think, one of the problems is that we have a lot of information out there, but very few people know how to apply it and make it appropriate to the concern. So, I know that was a broad stroke, John, but I'm wondering if maybe you'd be willing to just address some of the misinformation or flat out bad information that you're seeing in the industry, and see if you can kind of separate yourself of either how your products aren't doing that, or how your technology is different, so that the audience can learn a little bit more about how you guys do things.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean, as you stated, there's information at our fingertips these days, right? And so, I mean, you have a combination of other brands on the market that are trying to sell their product over yours. And what's even worse is the amount of information that's at the consumer's fingertips. So, I mean, you can go online and find research articles from universities or labs or what have you for just about anything you can imagine on Earth, including air purification technologies. So a lot of times people will go look up those articles. They'll find something that was published, 15, 20 years ago on a specific technology that may be similar to something we have in a product, and then draw their own conclusions based off of that. And it gets even worse because they'll take those conclusions and talk to another brand about it, or talk to an air quality expert about it, or their doctor about it, and then the information just spreads from, one patient to another, or one consumer to another, or goes on social media, blogs, forums, you name it. And, the more it spreads, the more the story alters and just almost creates some unneeded fear and anxiety. Some of it is warranted, though. I'll say there are some products out there that create tons of ozone, that will create ultrafine particles, that will do all kinds of stuff that they should not be doing. And yeah, you should steer clear of those. But, there's also legitimate uses for those technologies as well. We don't ever try, excuse me, we don't ever try to bash any of our competition, or, try to say one technology is better than another. I mean, it's really, even if you do an AI search for air purifier and you say, hey, ChatGPT, which air purifier should I buy? It's even going to spit out a response and tell you, well, depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So there's no one size fits all when it comes to air purification.
Yeah.
During COVID, people were selling UV stick lights left and right, trying to disinfect everything in a room. With
Yeah.
You don't want UV light shining everywhere, obviously. So we even get that one. So we have UV in our products. Customers say, well, I heard UV is dangerous. It can hurt your eyes and your skin. Well, yeah, we're not shining it in the room. It's contained within the product. So it's safe. You're not being exposed to the UV, just the air is. So
One of the things that I love about your company is that, I mean, you said it right. Like, there's this kind of all this wealth of information, and it's kind of like somebody vomits it on your plate. Excuse the example. But what I mean by that is, it is fear mongering. It's like literally information overload. I think the terms that the clinical industry loves to use is analysis paralysis, where you just freeze and you don't know what to do with this
right.
information. Take, for example, the UV and the light. You had to walk, and that's, your customer service has always been amazing. You guys actually take the time to explain it. Um, Beyond that, though, it kind of does. And I think that was possibly some of the healthy intentions. I think there's other people that, again, fearmonger for their own financial benefit, will make claims. But there's going to be some of the voices out there that have legitimate claims. And you're the only company that I'm aware of. Doesn't mean there's others that don't exist. But you're the only company that I'm aware of that tries to address them by the form of doing testing. Now, this is huge because as you've said, there's a variety of companies out there, and I'll say that so that you don't have to. There's some companies out there that don't even really do any research. They kind of take an existing, maybe you might call it established technology or seemingly established technology, slap it to a fan, mark it up for 15, a 1500%, and then basically tell you that this is the latest and greatest. But when you ask that company of what sort of research, even in-house research, which obviously can be biased, but better than nothing, you won't get an answer. And then there's our companies that do say, well, no, we do our own in-house. And that's great. I mean, you got to, any good company is going to have their own in-house because they're going to sound check themselves too. But the consumer is looking at you with a stinky eye. Like, well, how do we know? Oh, it conveniently came out good. Well, that works out quite fine for yourselves, doesn't it? And so then you get to the second level, which is third-party information, third-party companies that have no financial affiliation. And what I love about you guys is that you go there. Back in episode 17, when we talk about some of the earlier studies, I was amazed to listen to you and Jeff talk about how one of the studies, and I hope I don't butcher this too much, but basically you didn't pay for it. You didn't ask for it. They basically came to you and showed you the results of some of the testing they were doing, the testing they were doing from the technology that you guys were providing with these amazing results. And it kind of leads me into, like, for example, the iAdaptAir. I remember you telling me the story back in 2019 about how you noticed that here's the smaller company, Air Oasis, that has more of just a active purification technology, the 3000 that you mentioned. And you're starting to notice that there's consumers that are like still buying air filtration devices with HEPA units. You're like, why don't we combine the two? And there was the birth of the iAdaptAir. And at the time, I know we talked about it, and I'm assuming because you guys are always doing research. Every time I talk to you, there's like an active study going on. I know there's even more that I haven't had the privilege of being able to review yet. But at the time, we didn't really get into the iAdaptAir. And one of the things I want to pull up on my screen right now, if I can do it successfully, there's your beautiful website, is this study from the iAdaptAir. So let me just help people real quick. Let me show something here if I can get my screen to cooperate with me. So you had this, I know we can't cheat. Don't look at those units. We'll talk about those in a second. We have the iAdaptAirs, and this is an example of the unit. And if I transition now, if I can do this successfully, what we have here is another third-party study that was done in the summer of 2021. So, I mean, it's been a minute since we've spoken, but I wanted to share this with the audience. And John, fill in the blanks that you feel are pertinent about this study, because really I'm getting antsy to talk to people about the 2.0 and get into a couple other juicy topics. But basically, the results were what you guys are already promoting on your website, what we already know about the technology. In this particular study, they focused on chemicals, as you can see, formaldehyde, benzene, and TCE. Don't ask me to pronounce that chemical name or else I'll butcher it. But basically, these three different VOCs. And what I loved about this study is it really kind of gave the reader an idea of what were the dimensions, what were they doing to test the unit. It was basically a 4-foot cube. They had basically injected through these ports these chemicals. They talked about the type of NIOSH studies that they were doing. Just a wonderful study. Even talked about doing blank tests and just really went out of their way, like real good science. And then even provided the data. This is what the natural decay looked like when they were inside, when the unit, bear with me, when there was really no unit or something running in the chamber. And we see that. And if we keep on going down, so these are blanks of the formaldehyde. By the way, folks, these are really high levels. It's not normal to have 24 parts per million of formaldehyde in your house. You have 24 parts per million in that in your house, you're going to know it.
I was gonna say, I hope you don't have that much in your home.
Yeah, right. And then again, same thing with benzene. These are, again, bear with me. When we switch to these tables, Now what happens is we have this technology running. I'm assuming, like the iAdaptAir that I have running in my office right now, it was set on high with the technology being utilized, the UV, the ionization. Again, John, correct me if I'm off on this. And what we see is a clear reduction at time zero, 24 parts per million of benzene. And within 22 minutes of time, the number had already dropped down almost 87%. And within a few hours or less, it dropped down to, very low levels, basically 99%. And this is being injected with unrealistic levels of VOCs. It was really to test the integrity of the technology and see, can it really reduce these concentrations? If we scroll back up just as a control check with the benzene real quick, let me just do this right here. As you can see, 365 minutes into just letting it sit there, it was still 19.1, bear with me, parts per million in the air. So we can't even say that it was some issue of like settling or anything like that. Clearly the units were doing their job. And this probably won't come as a shocker to the audience, but it's the same story with both the TCE. Again, within 22 minutes, there was almost an 85% reduction with an unrealistic quantity too. So it's said in plain English, you wouldn't even be dealing with these normal high concentrations to begin with. And yet you can see this clear increase in performance. And then also, of course, the formaldehyde, which a lot of people are more aware of. Normally people don't have a 50-gallon drum of benzene in their home, but they might have some formaldehyde sources in their house from the pressed building materials, et cetera, et cetera. And as you can see, which is more of an understandable or relatable contaminant, we know that after 20 minutes, you're 24, again, unheard of levels of concentration. That must mean you're working in a formaldehyde factory, goes down to 1. That's still elevated, but an immediate reduction. And then by the time you get to within a few hours, it's back down to what we would consider to be background safe levels. So we see that visually depicted on the graph. And just, again, third party. So for those folks that are saying, well, does this technology work for chemical reduction? What we're seeing is the obvious answer is yes. And I will remind the audience as well that some of the other previous third-party testing that we talked about in episode 17 looked at byproducts too, the production of formaldehyde and other constituents, and none of that was showing up. A testimony to some of the complaints that people made, to your point earlier, John, when they would go online, find this information that, some study that was done, but don't really know the context, and then they assume that it must be applied to your technology, it must be this problem, it must cause this. Time and time again, your products by independent companies are showing the same thing. What have I missed, John, with this particular study that you'd like to cover?
I mean, you did a great job of highlighting it. I mean, this isn't it's not a lab we have a specific interest in. There was we talk about misinformation. I'm not going to mention the name, but there was another brand recently that has some studies. They were a filterless technology to start. They've since added some filtration, though it's not great. And they had all these research studies as well, but then come to find out, one of the owners of that brand was also an owner of the lab who did all the studies. I mean, they're highly biased. I mean, but
Thank eye.
Yeah. But yeah, they've since had some additional issues. There's actually like a Wirecutter Consumer Report. Some other agencies did some testing of their product and come to find out, it does not perform that well. But I mean, we invite people to test our product. You don't have to take our word for it. You don't have to take these third-party labs' words for it. I mean, we even have resellers in other countries overseas who constantly send us the tests that they've done, because before they sell the product, they don't take our word for it. They hire their own labs, they do their own testing, and say, hey, here's the results. Right. I mean, I've got I used to say a file to stick, but now everything's digital. So I've got a megabytes worth of a storage space of different studies that have been done by either labs that we've contracted, or just universities that have wanted to do testing for students doing thesis papers, or for even just people wanting to resell our product to do their own testing. So,
right. One of the things I heard, well, I've heard it for a while, but it keeps coming up, and I'd love for you to explain it to me like you did offline earlier. This issue of the hydroxyl radicals, and how one of the concerns or debates, if you will, that actually got brought up by a colleague of mine, um, was that we all know in this community that hydroxyl radicals are like, they're an oxidizer, kind of like ozone. They're a little bit different in how they work, but that they have this really short half-life. I mean, depending on what study you read and a couple of things, it's meant in the nanoseconds. It's very short. And so there was this confusion, even by myself a little bit, had to get corrected by you, where it was like, well, if your unit is producing these hydroxyl radicals, what real good is it doing to go out, if you will, into the environment and break down these chemicals? Or I know we haven't really touched on this subject real quick or yet, but this idea of killing or making sterilizing would be the word, the microbial concerns. We think about mold and bacteria and that sort of thing. But just to keep us on focus real quick, I want to talk about those hydroxyl radicals. I learned something from you today and even about a month ago about how your systems are different. So explain to the audience this thing about hydroxyl radicals and how they work, or how your unit's able to produce them in real world use.
Okay. Let's see how I can do this without getting too far into this science. I don't think everybody know about covalent bonds or anything. But
Right.
So there are a lot of hydroxyl generators out there today, and a lot of them do actually just produce hydroxyl straight out of the purification device. But what we use is a technology that's a coplasma, or a bipolar ionization. It's called bipolar because there's a positive and a negative pole to it. And within that energy field, it's not creating actual hydroxyl ions or hydroxyl radicals. It's actually splitting water molecules already present in your air into positive hydrogen and negative oxygen ions. And then those ions will create hydroxyls on the surface of whatever the contaminant is, mold, bacteria, anything biological, and rob the hydrogen from that on the actual surface. So we're not trying to create hydroxyls and expect them in milliseconds to travel across the room, seek out mold and bacteria, and then hydroxyl radical does its job. Instead, it's actually kind of taking these positives and negative ions and using those to form the hydroxyl on the surface of the contaminant. So therefore extending its ability to be a far-reaching technology.
It's why people should become educated, which is what one of our purposes of today's call is to do, is to educate folks of how that works. And that's just amazing. So it's kind of like taking good advantage of this. Again, just to make this in layman's, we're not necessarily taking care of certain contaminants right at the unit, although the filtration media that you have, which is also incredible, does a lot of that kind of first line of defense, if you will. But we all know that if you have a contaminant that's outside of the capture zone of your return, which anywhere, depending on the argument, is anywhere between 6 inches and 18 inches. It's not like a contaminant across the room, your point you made earlier, is beelining it towards this unit, even if it's on high.
Right.
But we know that technology is going above and beyond. And it's probably why we're able to see the reduction in VOCs with these devices across a room, is because this thing is doing work downstream. It's doing it well beyond an issue of a capture zone. It's using diffusion, because most people don't live in clean rooms where you have air movement that quick. But I also do think that air is moving a little bit more than we give it credit for in our otherwise stationary, sedentary homes. So that part's amazing. And again, to clarify, that's something I wanted the audience to know. It's one of the reasons why I really love these products is I think that we agree that we talked about this a little bit in episode 17, that the purposes of these machines aren't to solve world peace. The purpose of these machines are like a tool in the tool bucket to add to the total picture. Air Oasis has no argument. They're in full agreement that when it comes to contaminants, whenever you can, you remediate them at the source. If you have a 50-gallon drum of benzene, John's not going to tell you to put a device like this right there. He's going to tell you to move the drum of benzene out of the house. Same thing if you have a mold problem in a crawl space, in a living space, or what have you. You can really apply that to really any contaminant. But at the end of the day, there's still residuals. There's still stuff where it has nothing to do with the indoor. It could just be the outdoor, or maybe it is the indoor. Where I know that there's a lot of research being done in the industry right now. We'll leave it at that, with the creation of our own bacteria, actinomycetes, and other sorts of I wouldn't necessarily say contaminants, but background levels of constituents in the air, bacteria, mold, skin flakes, pollens from the outside that aren't necessarily a water damaged building thing or a off gassing of a major chemical thing in the house. It's just this residual, which actually leads me to my other point is sometimes there's people, a lot of people that have homes where it's like they find out that, yeah, you know what, I am chemically sensitive or chemically conscious. And I bought this home or I've been in the home and it's got this new cabinetry, but they don't have the money to replace it. They're not going to spend $30,000 on new cabinetry, but they're able to install a device that might just get them over that fulcrum of the difference between that's too much, I can't handle it, to where, oh, wow, I'm actually tolerating it, and symptomatically, I'm actually improving. I know you guys are deep into some of that research right now, which is another reason why I love your company and another reason why I love this product. Um, but like a kid at Disneyland waiting in line to take the ride that he wants to go on, I have been so stoked to talk to you guys about the new product that you guys have been unveiling. It's this 2.0 unit that I'm working my way over for everyone to see. It's this product line. And like a kid at Disneyland waiting to take the ride, I have 20 questions I want to ask you at the same time. So I'm going to do my best to,
How long is the podcast?
Yeah, we might have to have another episode. The unveiling of the 2.0. These things were released officially to the public, what, a couple weeks ago? Or am I off on the timeline?
We just started shipping them last, Tuesday or Wednesday? So about a week ago.
Okay. This is really exciting. Now, if I could summarize what we're about to talk about for the next umpteen minutes, I would say that this seems like it's the Air Oasis iAdaptAir, the first version. We'll call that 1.0. This unit is 2.0 on steroids. Yeah. Now, I don't mean to say steroids in a negative way. Some people can say, well, maybe too much is too good of a thing. Why did you guys, in all sincerity, create this line of unit? What is different about these units than the current versions that people may have in their home already?
I mean, like you said, we've heard that term before. It's the iAdaptAir and steroids. So it's once again, how much time do we have on this? Yeah, it was customer feedback. Like I said, our goal at Air Oasis is constant improvement. I mean, my partners in the business would probably tell me I spend too much money on research and development and studies, but I have a heart for helping people, so that's what we do. And this product is a result of that. We took customer feedback. Whenever we first introduced the original iAdaptAir, it was our first time to have something with filtration in it, because like you said previously, we had just filterless technology. So we use several different ones in different products, and even have some of it put into other products for other manufacturers. But we quickly learned that there's multiple needs that people have, and sometimes filtration is the right method to use. Sometimes it's filterless technologies that are the right thing to use. So we decided, hey, why not put it all into one box? So I started the original iAdaptAir. But then we quickly learned there's still lots of room for improvement. You even pointed out, I think in our first interview or at some point in time, that, yeah, I like the iAdaptAir, but the CADR, clean air delivery rate, is not as good as it should be. So we did more research and totally agree. So we have updated the CADR in this unit for one thing. So the Pro you're looking at right there is probably, you're going to be hard pressed to find anything with that have a CADR. I think it's 706 CFM. So, I mean, you can clean 1,059 square feet of air every 12 minutes or 5 times per hour. I mean, that's kind of unheard of. The industry leading products that are out there now are going to be around, 350, 400 CFM, something like that. And we're at 706. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I had a guy buy one of these the other day and said, hey, well, did I get too big of a unit for my living room? I said, how big is your living room? He's like, oh, it's about 200 square feet. I was like, well, you're going to have the cleanest living room in Amarillo, Texas. Right. You can do it, buddy, if you want to, but yeah, it's not going to hurt anything, but you can probably leave it on low and have pristine, clean room quality air. So, I mean, it's ridiculous. But the CADRs, up to 3 times what it was on the previous units. We've switched to UV LEDs instead of UV lamps. So there's UV LEDs have no mercury. They have a very consistent output, so it won't fluctuate based on humidity, temperature, or anything else. So the UV is going to work. You can cycle them on and off as many times as you want without causing damage. You won't have to replace them. They'll last the life of the unit. So all kinds of advancements with the UV LEDs. Also, a new and improved air quality sensor on this unit. So it actually gives you a numerical readout. If you choose one of these images on the side, you can probably see it. So you can actually see the number of particles in your air. So not just the circle that turns green, orange, red, but instead of tell you there's 12 particles per cubic centimeter or per cubic meter, there's 185 particles, whatever it may be.
Right.
Last night, as a matter of fact, my wife was cooking dinner and didn't turn on the exhaust in the kitchen and got a little smoky in the house. And I walked by our medium iAdaptAir sitting close to that area, and the circle was orange. I think there was 89 particles in the air, and within like 15 minutes, it was back down to like two or three. I mean,
What I
so
love about this unit, not to interrupt you too, and I'll try to segue this in when it gets more appropriate, but I have the same medium unit as you do, and I love the auto feature about it. It's like it will detect the levels, and even if the threat isn't that threatening, it ends up being just elevated moisture because you left your humidifier on or something like that. There'll be a number of cases, dust storms, that sort of thing, where the numbers will kick up and then it'll automatically, at least on auto mode, will
uh-huh.
kick on and go to a higher level. Once it lowers, it slows down again. I just love that feature.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. And it's cool because you can look at it and see exactly how many particles it are currently in your air. So you can see it reducing it. So you're not waiting or you're not curious about how long is this going to take. You can see how fast it's happening. Um, all kinds of neat features on the control panel, additional timers for turning the unit automatically off. This one has up to 2 year filter life, and it'll tell you the percentage of filter life remaining. So you're not thinking, okay, well, am I going off a color indicator or just one day it turns red and you're like, oh, I need to change my filter and get in a rush. Instead, it kind of counts it down for you. So you have time to plan for that filter change. Um, it's quieter, a whole lot quieter than the old unit. I mean, it's less than that's like 25 decibels, I think, on low, and the highest speed, I think, is 52 decibels.
Right.
And that's on the largest unit. So it's very quiet. I mean, it could just, like you said, we took all the feedback that we've collected over 5 or 6 years of the original unit and just try to solve everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's so far we haven't had any complaints from anybody other than people who say I like the white on white of the old unit and I don't like the black features. That's
You
that's
guys
it.
have always been open-minded and listening, but if that's what's being thrown at you at the moment, good for you guys. Congratulations. There's a story, and John knows it well, behind this particular unit, and my involvement or my opinion, you might say. When I saw that these units, or heard more rather, that these units were coming back, I was really frothing out the mouth to test them, because again, it was like basically the original 1.0 on steroids. It was basically more of it, and a lot with the Catter rating, the ability for it to filter more air. And to the guy that bought the large unit, um, uh, and has a 200 square foot living room, let's assume average ceiling height, you might be right that he could set the thing on low. But one of the things I always tell people are this: keep it in mind that while it is on low, that means that hopefully that filter life will be extended. And the second thing, of course, is that a lot of people, even though it is relatively quiet, some people love that. Like I'm a white noise person. In fact, I use this device to sleep at night. But what I'm telling people is that a lot of times the high mode it might be too much even still for most people. And so it's ironic that a lot of times people that buy the larger units, they don't realize, well, you think that, you guys have to give some metric, right? You have to give some metric for people to use. But at the end of the day, I always, if you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly, which translates in don't be afraid to buy the next larger unit up, because you're not always going to run that unit on the highest mode. You're going to run it at different levels that suit your needs, or maybe there's people trying to talk and the unit's right behind your head, or whatever the case may be. So I
And
love
that's
it.
why we, sorry to cut you off. That's why in like the
Yeah.
specification section on each one of these product pages, we do outline what the Catter is per fan speed and also what the decibel level is. So that way you can decide what's my tolerance level of noise. It's towards the bottom of the page if you keep scrolling down. But you can decide at that point in time, okay, well, what's my tolerance of noise level and how quickly do I want to clean the air? And that can help you size the right unit. So,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, there you go.
So that way, okay, well, for my master suite, maybe I want to be able to run it just on medium for a little bit of white noise while I sleep, but I don't want to go on high. So which size of unit can do
Right.
that. You may have to upsize it to a medium or a large to get that done.
Right. And
Yeah.
and yes, to answer this question, you can turn off the technology. I played around with the unit quite a bit. Specifically, let me go back to it. Specifically, this unit right here. And I just love the ability to play around. So, John, if you don't mind, I'd like to share a summary version of my involvement, and not just that, but kind of tee it off to your guys' response and what you did next.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's hear it.
so yeah, okay. So when I found out about these units, um, I, I wanted to be able to test them. I was given that opportunity, and I ended up proceeding to go purchase a formaldemeter. There was a complaint or concern at the time that I had heard about again, because of people going online and finding studies that these types of technologies can produce ultrafine particles. So I rented out an calibrated ultrafine meter and did some in-home testing. And when I did that testing, I'd played around with this unit under a variety of settings, low, medium, high, with or without this technology, that technology. And there was no doubt that there was a reduction. That's the short version to keep people off the edge of their seats. But I also found that, I'm doing it in the middle of the bedroom, testing, and I'm sitting there on a chair and, wearing my basketball shorts, trying to, test. And I didn't feel like that was an official study. So I kind of went back to John. I said, listen, things look initially, great. Again, not shocked, but, I had brought up to John's attention, and I don't mean to go out of order with the story, John. So if there's anything intentionally needing to be corrected, let me know. But the bottom line is we got into this deeper discussion about hearing some concerns, and like the latest big concern was this production of ultrafine particles. You've done so many independent studies about the production of byproducts. We're not seeing anything. We're seeing the reduction of chemicals, not the other way around. And so that seemed like that box was checked. And then we got into ultrafines, but we didn't really have anything on ultrafine production. Now, this is different. We're talking about particles that are in like the virus size of things on the lower end. So when we think about the average mold spore, we think about, bear with me, we think about 5 microns, 2 to 5 microns, all of which is not really visible to the naked eye. But when you're getting into like the nanoparticle size, for example, a 5 micron mold spore is about 5,000 nanometers. And so a 5 nanometer particle is like super, super small. So I kept on going back and forth with John and saying, well, is there a way we can test it? And what was amazing about Air Oasis again was that, I have no stake in the game. I don't have any hard financial interest with these companies. I just wanted to see, can we just squash this? I'm so tired of people bringing stuff up. And unfortunately, I didn't have the money. I was willing to offer to help, but I didn't have the money. And John looked at me and eventually said, you know what? Fine, let's do this. And so they ended up doing this study, which I have up on my screen right now. Sorry, I was kind of looking at the data. This year, that's how recent this conversation was. And what we did was, and rather I should say, what Air Oasis did was they found an independent company right here. You can see MSGS that actually tested for particles that were in the nanoparticle size range. And so I want to scroll down. I'm really excited to share this information, but I'll try to not overwhelm the audience. Uh, what you're seeing here, and there is one typo here where my cursor is at, that should be nanometers. It says microns, so just remember that. But what they did is they basically used a certain particulate dust that ranged in size. And these are nanometer sizes. So 50 to 63 nanometers, 60 to 79 nanometers. And it goes up and it goes up and it goes up. And what they did to start the conversations, they end up doing some baseline testing, just like the other study I showed you guys earlier. They wanted to see what the natural decay is. So they went from all the way to like ultrafine, nanoparticulate sizes, all the way up to 1,000 would be 1 micron, still very small. And as you can see, the different levels over time, this column right here represents time. It went low, but not that much. In fact, they're so small that there wasn't a lot of settling. Makes a lot of sense. And so the decay over a 20-minute period, there's very little of it. There's some, but very little of it. And then what they did, because John and I went back and forth, we're like, well, we'll just test the unit as is, high with all the technology. I want to see the difference. We got people complaining about the technology when it's on versus when it's off. Let's take a look at both of it. So again, after going, because this stuff isn't cheap, this cost a ton of money to do this. And so they agreed to do this test. And what we have here is they have the unit being ran in two different settings. The first setting they did was with the unit on max with the UV and ionizer features activated. So they were running. And what we see again is they kind of get a control sample showing that the chamber doesn't have, anything really in it. And then they basically show, here's what happens when we inject this fine dust into the chamber. And now let's watch what happens when we run the unit. And as might be clear, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit in case it's small for some of you. What you can see is from the first minute where they started to run the unit to 20 minutes later, we were down to there being nothing detectable at those ranges. Just to go back to the natural decay graph, this is the one where the unit wasn't running. You can see it didn't really change, so it was definitely there. And what you're also seeing, and this is probably the most important takeaway, is there's no perceived identified production of ultrafines. If this machine is being accused of producing ultrafines, you would think you would see that reflected in appreciable numbers, and we're just not seeing that. This is with the technology on, all of it, UV ionization with the filtration media operating. And then this chart here shows it with just the filtration running. And so this would just be like, hey, I just want to run it like a normal HEPA unit. Okay, it's the same story. Baseline sampling here with the particle sizes being around, in this general range here based off of the sizes. And then by the time you get down to 20 minutes, you're next to nothing. You're very, very low. A couple of ones showing up, but I mean, that's essentially a zero when you think about the size of particles that we're talking about. In the matter of 7 to 8 minutes for both of these units, or rather both of these settings, forgive me, what you're seeing is a clear picture. In fact, with the technology running, it actually seems to be quicker. You're seeing a reduction in ultrafine particle sizes in this chamber study. So I'll slow down a little bit and just put up this front page and then have a discussion with you, John. So what I love about this is I'll try to be not cryptic, but without naming names. We had a client that reached out to us, and what had happened was they were basically saying that, we have concerns that these are producing ultrafine particles. And when you think about ultrafine particles, one of the concerns about that is that it's stuff that can get deeper in the lungs, possibly cause more health issues and that sort of thing. And we've heard that before. In fact, a few years ago, there was a well-known purification only brand. It made a lot of headlines during COVID. And as a matter of fact, a colleague of mine tested that unit and actually saw ultrafine production. It was less going in than it was going out. And I think maybe there's some clarification of what are your guesses of why some units might produce ultrafines versus not. But it kind of just kept on being fueled, this argument, this complaint. And one of these clients that reached out to me was working with some investigator who provided a wealth of studies to back her claim that this device is going to cause health concerns or problems. And the studies were, as best as I could read them, were kind of similar to what you said, John. It was like, well, yeah, but how do you know that the technologies and how they were being utilized in this study that might have been done by some college graduate trying to make a thesis kind of a thing was the same as what your unit is doing? And I found that very frustrating. And so I'm so thankful that, and this, again, it's a testament to the kind of company you guys are, that you guys were willing to say, all right, we'll spend the money and we'll do this research independent so that it's not, stinky eye time, and see what it can actually do. And I was pleasantly surprised, not shocked, that the technology ended up showing that reduction. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being transparent. Thank you for addressing the questions, because we're working with people with chronic illness, low dose environmental exposure concerns. And the last thing they want to do is add another variable in their equation when it comes to exposure. They want to remove it or they want to lower it.
I mean,
You're the only company.
anytime we have questions like this, I mean, that's the big driver why we do these tests. Because like I said, we do have our heart just for helping people. And so, I mean, we're not helping them if we're creating these ultrafine particles or we're creating byproducts of other chemicals or what have you. So, we want to constantly improve as well. That's why we don't mind doing the testing, because if come to find out there's something we missed, I mean, we're human. We've missed stuff in the past.
Right.
So if there's something we've missed and we are doing something that we weren't aware of that needs to be corrected, then we need to run the lab test. We need to find out what's being created, and then we're going to figure out how to solve it.
Right.
I mean, that's all there is to it. So, I mean, that's why we're kind of open to doing the test. We went back and forth a little bit about whether or not there was any need to turn the other technologies on or off, because I was thinking, you have all the technologies on and prove it doesn't create ultrafines, then, done. But, you wanted a nice test that kind of showed both variances to make sure there wasn't any trickery or anything. So that was great. I'm glad you welcomed it. So
well, to that point, what we learn is that it's not, sometimes when we throw those variables in there, like let's do it without the purification on versus, is not because of what we know, clearly. It's what we don't know. And it's like, well, let's squash it.
Yeah.
John, why do you, if the answer is I don't know, we're still looking, fine, that's whatever. But why do you think that some technologies might produce ultrafines? Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, what, yours doesn't appear to be doing it, but it's a big claim out there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get into too much proprietary information, but
That's fine.
I mean, there are versions of similar technologies that we use when used incorrectly that will create ultrafine particles. I mean, there's forms of PCO out there that will create formaldehyde as a byproduct. I mean, it's been proven. We've done testing on other products that have done it as well. And so, yeah, it's possible. And that's why that research exists. I mean, so you do have to be careful if you're buying a product that contains PCO, UV, ionization, you name it. You could end up with high amounts of ozone. You can end up with formaldehyde byproducts due to incomplete degradation. You can end up with ultrafine particles, you name it. Some of it comes down to, using the right combination of technologies, or, using the technologies in the right sequence of exposure when it comes to the air, velocities of air. I mean, you name it. There's a lot of factors involved that can create those scenarios. And even, we used to sell a lot of air purification that was filterless for HVAC applications for central heat and air. And when we were in that market, man, that's the Wild West. I mean, we actually finally just bowed out of the market because there was so many competitors, especially during COVID. They all popped up and were selling all kinds of snake oil, you name it, trying to tell everybody they could rid their environment of COVID. And it's, it just doesn't work too well. I mean, we had some great sound technologies. We had testing that showed that it was making an impact in your air conditioner. But let's face it, even then, as you talked about it earlier, there's going to be some stale air in your home that your air conditioner is not circulating. Areas that you're not spreading the ions to, or does not getting pulled through your HVAC system. And even then, during times of the year, your HVAC is going to cycle on and off every 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, depending on temperature. So it's just not doing an adequate job of cleaning the air. So that's another reason why we decided we're going to stick with, portable room air purifiers, so we can truly provide clean air and not leave to question whether or not it's doing its job. But let's see. Back to your original question. Sorry, I went down bunny trail a little bit.
I get it. I get it.
But yeah, I mean, so I know which competitor you're talking about, because like I said, they were tested by, some Consumer Reports and Wirecutter or other areas, and some other lab tests as well. And actually filed bankruptcy eventually, even though they're still selling their products somehow. But yeah, they were strictly more of a PCO type product. They had their own trade name for it.
Yep.
They contain the letters PCO as well as one additional letter. But but they that was all they had, and so if you have a strictly just PCO alone type of product, with the right resonance time of air passing through the device, then yeah, you're going to break particles down into smaller particles. I mean, that's just how the technology works.
residence time. Help explain to the audience what you're getting at least with what that means.
Oh, just how slow the air moves through the device, which is another reason why their device didn't test it well when you test it for clean air delivery rate, is because they have to pass the air through the device slowly for PCO to actually do its job. It needs long exposure time to whatever the contaminant it is, because all PCO does is oxidize. So it takes, whether it's a microorganism or whether it's a dust particle, it's basically think of it as rust. It's just breaking it down into smaller particles. And the process, when it's a microorganism such as COVID, it's going to actually sterilize that in the process. So it's no longer harmful to humans.
Right.
And so it can do that effectively, but at the same time, it will create ultrafine particles because that's what it's doing. It's just degrading particles into smaller particles.
Yeah.
And so if that's all you have in your device, that's what you're going to do. But whenever we don't use PCO inside our iAdaptAirs, but if we did, we would layer it in there correctly so that that's not happening. Either put the proper filtration before or after it, have the right airflow rates, whatever you have to do to keep that from happening.
Yeah.
So there's ways to accomplish it. You just have to spend a little time in developing your product.
Yeah. What a concept. You can't just buy the technology and assume it's as easy as slapping it against a $25 box fan and
Right.
that it's going to somehow, work for you. I'll add to, and I appreciate you explain that a little bit. So it's a science and there's a lot that goes into it. And Air Oasis is one of those companies that are taking the time to do it, taking the time to listen. I really don't know of another company that does that level of response to what the industry is demanding, because not all the information online is bad. I mean, I admit it can be overwhelming. And a lot of times people are like, well, now I have more questions, but there is some good stuff out there, and there are good questions out there, and it leads to this. I guess you might call it an issue of accountability, and saying if you guys have this much reach, you have this much responsibility, and that's actually biblical. But the point is that you guys are responding to that demand, and we really appreciate it. In fact, you guys go even one step before. I don't know if it's still active. I think I saw a sticker that would indicate it is, but you guys even offer, I think it's like a 60-day risk-free period to where a unit, if someone buys the unit, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, and doesn't like it, they have up to 60 days to return it. And I don't know if there's any sort of restocking fee or whatever, but it sounds like they'll get a majority of their money back.
Yeah. I mean, it's 100% because we don't, we offer free shipping on our website. So if you chose free shipping, then, we're not going to say we're not going to refund your shipping because it was free.
Right.
And if you don't like the product, yeah, we refund 100% of the purchase price of that product. We may even try to help you out a little bit farther. Hopefully our customer excellence team is doing their job and helping you out farther. But so usually, we'll say, okay, well, what did you not like about the product? Because sometimes it's a sizing issue, or they're like, hey, I've got a large iAdaptAir and I don't want to spend the money to replace these filters, just realize how much they are. Well, they may be okay with a smaller size unit for what the job that they're trying to accomplish. So,
Right.
So we'll work with them and try to find the right solution. If we can't find the right solution, great, we'll issue a refund, and sometimes we'll even go as far as to offer a better solution. I mean, we've had people buy our products that have some commercial environment that they're trying to solve with a small home air purifier. And we're like, look, don't buy our purifier. We'll give you a refund. Don't even buy XYZ you're looking at. Put in a vent. You need to exhaust.
Right. It goes back to the tool in the toolbox, and I'll segue to that final point is, from personal experience, I can tell you that these units are doing their jobs. I have particle counters. We've obviously seen that Ultrafine study, and we're seeing those same types of results in the field. They have to be able to measure it in controlled chambers so that they can really give you accurate performance measures. And like, this is what it's actually doing, because we don't live in a laboratory setting in our homes. We live in the real world, and it's going to have a lot of influences that could skew things either positive or negative. Either way, we want to be fair. And so it shows that. I love the 60-day. I think it's a great tool to have. I love the portable movement. Even in my own home, I have a mechanical ventilation device. Some people know that as an HRV, ERV to bring in fresh air. That air is actually HEPA filtered. I have two systems, one of which has a air conditioning systems, one of which has a MERV 12, the other one has a MERV 14. And all of those, those three things working together do a really good job to improve the indoor air quality. But then there's this whole kind of like per room, can we bring it down even lower? And who knows? In some homes, quite frankly, it might be overkill. But when you're somebody who's dealing with chronic illness, or you're on that journey for recovery, I mean, you can see these numbers working. You run a particle counter and watch it reduce levels in these homes like ridiculously lower than even your outdoor ambient levels with this sort of addition, especially these 2.0s. And again, without having any financial ties at all with these folks, I can tell you, go big, be a grizzly. It might cost more for filter replacements, but consider the cost that you're spending for other issues, for your own health, for the supplements, for the doctor visits are typically pales in comparison. That is to say, the cost of these filters of what you're spending.
I'm glad you bring that up. I mean, that's just, we only have so much real estate on a website or anything else to tell the story of, to help somebody make the right purchase decision. So, we can't put all that information on there. So I'm glad you bring it up, because I mean, you're absolutely right. Even, your health is important, how much more money you're going to spend if you don't have clean air. And then even when you do have the product, people get afraid of the cost for the filter replacement, so they won't go with a bigger unit. But if you have a bigger unit and you run it on low, you replace it less often. So in the long run, you could actually spend less money by going with a bigger unit.
Right.
Less power consumption, less filter consumption. I mean, you name it. So it's, but it's, I can understand, you only have the budget you have. Sometimes you have to start small. We do have a ton of customers who will start with a smaller unit and kind of add to their collection over time as well. So, I mean, there's two ways to go about it. You can spread small units throughout the space, or one large unit within the space and run it on low,
Right. No, absolutely. And again, it's a great tool to the toolbox. That is to say, with the total indoor air quality picture. I know that you guys still have some more amazing research that you guys are doing. We'll leave that as a teaser to the audience for now. Maybe we can have a round 3 podcast with you guys, but just more great information to validate the claims or address the concerns that are being brought out well above and beyond the stuff that we've talked about today. For those of you that are listening, for those that are new to you guys, John, what would be the best way you could explain to them obviously this is your website, how to navigate it, how to reach out to you if they have questions, that sort of thing?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we try to put as much information as we can on the website without being inundating.
Right.
We also have, if you scroll to the bottom real quick, Michael, we also have, if you do want to dig deeper into more information, there's a blog. Just go up a little bit higher. Well, you can click there, and then above it, there's a few more categories as well. But we have, tons of information within our blog that can help you dig deeper into, selecting the right product, or worst comes to worst, you can use our live chat or call us or email us, and somebody will walk you through the right purchase decision. So, we're always open to helping people. And if for some reason we don't think we have the right product for you, we'll let you know that too. So.
Right on. Much appreciated, John. And for the audience, by the time you guys are going to be watching this, there should be a discount code that we're going to have available, or that Air Oasis is going to provide for you. It's going to be good for about a couple of weeks. So if you're listening to this podcast and you hear that, know that you got about 2 weeks from the time that this airs to reach out to them and order one of these units if you'd like to. John, thank you so much again for your time today, for taking the time to kind of update everybody, and really for addressing the you guys kind of swim upstream. What I mean by that is you guys are willing to fight the current of that information that's being coming out in the field, as we as a society, as we as communities are learning more. You guys are the most gracious people I ever know, the most generous people that we know, which is why I'm proud to say those things and promote you guys as much as I can. You guys are doing a great job. So thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate us giving us the opportunity to express our voice in all this matters. So
we'll see you on the next one.
All right.
The content of this show is for informational purposes and represents the sole opinion of the host and its interviewees only. Any reliance on the information provided in this show is done at your own risk. Additional opinions and/or research may change our current view of the topics spoken in this show. We do our best to minimize any inaccuracies presented and make legitimate efforts to back all comments with our own field experience, independent literature, or studies that support the topics discussed. This information should not be used to make conclusive decisions regarding your health or exposure. Ultimately, all questions and/or concerns regarding your health should be addressed by a qualified physician. Additional exposure concerns and/or questions pertaining to the health of your home or building should be addressed by qualified and on-site professionals. Any and all products and services discussed in this show should not be construed as a recommendation, endorsement, or a guarantee that their use is appropriate for your situation. In short, we hope this information is of value to you, but please do not act upon it without actual and individual consultation and guidance by professionals who have taken the time and appropriate collection of data to assess your unique situation.